right-leaning influencers and news anchors are telling us that Trump's tariffs are going to make us all rich beyond our wildest dreams. They're telling us that President Trump is currently playing 5D chess and we just don't understand the strategy, that we should take a seat and patiently wait to see his plans take effect and yield results. This is what they're telling us. They're telling us to believe that a tariff, which will be a tax on imported goods that we use every day, is going to somehow make us all rich. Do you believe this? The reality is that it won't make us all rich. It will, however, make some of the people at the very top even richer than they currently are.
You got the top 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 92%. Listen to this. This is a statistic we recently saw. It came from the Federal Reserve. Over the last 30 years, the top 1% has seen a $21 trillion increase in their wealth.
Let's talk about this today, but before we go on, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel where I do my best to give you a centrist point of view, where the left or the right spin, and where I always make sure that I include both point of views, even if I may not agree with them. All right, let's get started. When they tell us that we're all going to become rich beyond our wildest dreams, that the tariffs are going to bring about a new golden age for America, they're not talking about you or I becoming rich. They're talking about the GDP for the country increasing.
What is GDP? The word GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product. Gross means total or overall. Domestic means it happens within a country's border, and product means goods and services. So GDP is the total value of final goods and services produced within a country in a specific time period, usually a quarter or a year.
And listen, an increase in the GDP is great news for the country. I'm not saying that it's not a good thing, but GDP measures the productivity of a country. And it doesn't mean that this increase in productivity and wealth is really going to be shared equally by all its citizens.
GDP only shows total country economy production, so it couldn't really show whether the people live well. For example, a country like Equatorial Guinea has PPP GDP per capita around $17,000 in 2023, according to the World Bank, which is one of the highest in Africa. You might think Equatorial Guinea is rich, but actually its high GDP is due to oil production that's controlled by the government. While the people, about 70% of the population, live below the poverty line and get no benefit from the oil economy due to massive corruption and unequal distribution. That's why GDP or GDP per capita doesn't always equal to high quality of life.
Now here's a funny story. When I go to Quora.com, I'll see arguments online from people who live in the same region, maybe Latin America or Asia, where they'll say, my country is the richest one, and somebody else will reply, well, my country is the richest because the GDP for our country in XYZ year was this much. When I read this, I can't help but think to myself, again, that GDP measures the productivity of a country. It doesn't really mean wealth for the individual. It's better to live in a country that has medium GDP with good income distribution among this population than to live in a high GDP country which has high income inequality, where people can't purchase basic needs such as groceries or cover their housing. Here in the United States, we've had rising GDP for years now, and the wages in the meanwhile, they've remained stagnant. In the United States, the minimum wage has been frozen at $7.25 since 2009. All the while, CEO pay has increased by 1,200% since 1978. This means that while we've seen growing GDP in our country for years now, this increase in wealth is typically going to the hands of a few who are already rich, and most of us are not seeing the benefits of increased GDP for the country. We recently had a historic drop in the stock market that was caused by the tariffs that President Trump imposed on several countries that we trade with. But many people said they didn't care.
Stock drop off? I got to tell you, no, like you mentioned, nobody under 30 gives it.
And we found out only about 10% of Americans actually own stocks, and that 10% own about 90% of all the stocks.
The distribution of equities across households, the top 10% of Americans own 88% of equities, 88% of the stock market.
Many people on social media on the left were saying that they didn't care about the stock market because they don't own stocks or they don't own a 401k. And at the same time, many people on the right were saying that even though the stock market was crashing, it was good because it was only affecting the super rich and it was sparing the lower class and the middle class. They said that this was the plan all along. Who do you agree with, the left or the right? Now, this is why many people are saying that the stock market and GDP are not good measures of how the economy is doing, because even when the stock market is doing great or when the GDP is increasing, many people will not feel it. What they do feel is what happens and affects their daily life, such as grocery costs doubling or the rent prices increasing, or they're still making $7.25 because the minimum wage has not increased. Did you know that the highest minimum wage rate is in Washington, D.C. at $17.50, and the lowest minimum wage rate is still the federal rate, which is $7.25?
But I'd love you to define a term that you just used, which is income inequality or wealth inequality. Like, what does that actually mean?
I mean, the way economists tend to think about it is it's a measure called the Gini coefficient. It's like what percent of the wealth is owned by what percent of the people.
Sure.
Right? In an equal society, 50% of the wealth is distributed across 50% of the people. I think that's the very, kind of economic-y way of thinking about it. The other way I think about it is there's a more philosophical approach, which is this concept of like, what does a good society provide for the people who have the least?
Sure.
And that.
Earlier today, I saw a video from the channel Breaking Points where Krystal Ball said something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing, that the tariffs are being implemented unevenly, that big companies are getting exemptions while the small companies, small business owners are being affected hard. And yet Republicans are saying that this is a win for the people.
Here is the definitive proof that Trump's tariffs are class war against the 99%, the likes of which we have perhaps never seen before. All right, number one. Massive corporations are being liberated from Trump's tariffs while the little guys are getting screwed. Stocks were up yesterday after the Trump administration announced significant exemptions to their 145% China tariffs that would be particularly beneficial to so-called Magnificent Seven companies like Apple and Nvidia.
A prosperous country is not measured by the size of the pie, but by how it's shared. Now, I'm not saying that we all need to make the same amount, but that we should all be able to afford housing, be able to put food on the table, and have a path forward. It's not just about growing GDP. We have to ask, are we all getting a slice of the pie? All right, this ends today's video. Please drop a comment below if you feel that as we've had the GDP increase for our country, you're not feeling the same effect on your wallet or on your checking account. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe. It would really help me out.